Do you believe that sometimes the very people you raised with all your heart are the first to turn their backs when you're at your weakest? Can forgiveness truly mend an ungrateful child? Or is it just a way we deceive our own hearts? I am Melissa Hastings, 65 years old, living in Charleston, South Carolina, in the grand mansion my parents left me. If you looked from the outside, you'd think I had it all: money, prestige, a life anyone would dream of. But the truth is, my life is like a hardcover book with beautiful binding. Inside, every page is crumpled, torn. I grew up in wealth, a family known throughout Charleston. My father, George Hastings, owned a major shipping company, transporting goods from the Charleston port all along the East Coast. My mother, Evelyn, was a sharp woman, always busy organizing lavish parties at home, where people came to boast about their assets and talk about money. I was the only child, and it wasn't easy. My parents demanded perfection: hair neatly combed, dresses without a single wrinkle. I remember evenings spent standing in the living room in long silk gowns, shaking hands with strangers, while my heart longed to run outside, sit under the oak tree in the backyard, and read. Mother once told me, "Melissa, the rich don't need friends, they need allies." Those words followed me my whole life, and I hated them. When I was 25, my parents decided I must marry Wayne Prescott. Wayne was a young, tall businessman with slick-back dark hair and a smile that could easily charm anyone. But I knew from the first glance he didn't love me. He only wanted my father's money, the connection to the Hastings family, our name to climb the ladder of success. The first time we met, he shook my hand and said, "You're a good girl, Melissa. I think we'll get along." His voice was smooth, but his eyes were cold. I just nodded, knowing I had no choice. My father had made it clear, this is for the good of the family. The wedding took place in Charleston's largest church, with hundreds of guests, white flowers lining the aisle, and a long article in the local newspaper. I wore a white wedding dress, but it felt heavy, cold, and like it didn't belong to me. In the early years of marriage, I tried to be a good wife. I learned to cook, though Wayne rarely praised my efforts. I'd make the beef stew my mother taught me, setting the table hoping he'd sit down. Talk to me like a husband, but usually he'd just nod, eat quickly, and disappear into his study. I threw parties, inviting his friends and partners, even though they barely acknowledged me. I tried to make conversation, asking about their work, their families, but they'd offer polite smiles before turning back to Wayne. I began to feel like an invisible shadow, but the deepest pain was my inability to have children. I saw doctors, underwent countless tests, and was told there was something wrong with my uterus. I don't remember the specifics, only the feeling of my world collapsing when the doctor shook his head. I went home, sat in the bedroom staring at my reflection, and wondered, what value do I have if I can't do what everyone expects? Wayne didn't say much, but I saw his eyes grow more distant. Once, at a party, I overheard his aunt whisper to a friend, "Poor Melissa, can't give the Prescotts an heir. Wayne deserves better." Those words cut like a knife. I started feeling inadequate, believing I was a failure. Then one day, everything changed. Wayne came home carrying a little boy, about 2 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes, trembling in a worn, tattered coat. He said the boy's name was Harry, abandoned outside his company's gate. "I couldn't just leave him there," Wayne said, his voice filled with a compassion I rarely heard from him. I looked at Harry and my heart melted. He was so small, clutching my finger, his big round eyes looking up at me as if pleading for help. I knelt, pulled him into my arms, and in that instant, I knew I would love him as my own son. I poured all my time into Harry. I stayed up late when he was sick, sitting by his bedside, singing the lullabies my mother used to sing to me. I took him to the park, pushed him on the swings, laughed when he called me Mommy. Those moments made me feel like I finally had a real family. Wayne remained largely indifferent, always busy with work, long trips, late-night calls. I told myself it was normal that men like him needed to work hard to provide, but sometimes I caught him looking at Harry with a strange expression, as if guarding a secret. I pushed the thought away, unwilling to shatter the happiness I was desperately trying to build. Harry grew up smart and strong. He did well in school, played football, and always made me proud. I remember the birthday he gave me, a hand-drawn picture, a crayon sketch of the three of us in front of our house. I hung it in my bedroom, looking at it every night before sleep, but Wayne grew increasingly distant. He came home late, sometimes not at all. Rumors started circulating that he had someone else, that he wasn't happy. I confronted him once, asking directly, "Wayne, do you still want to be with me?" He just laughed, saying, "Don't be so sensitive, Melissa. I'm just busy with business." I believed him, because I couldn't bear to lose the family I'd spent my life trying to hold together. Then came my retirement at 65. I had worked at my family's company for 30 years, managing accounts, signing contracts. As the only Hastings daughter, it was expected. When I was young, Father would take me to the office, point to the cargo ships in the harbor and say, "Melissa, this is our family's lifeblood. You must protect it no matter what." His words became an oath etched in my soul. When I married Wayne, I knew he had his own ambitious real estate venture. He'd suggested I join him, saying husband and wife should build an empire together. But I saw how he operated, the secret calls, the murky deals, the coldness in his eyes when discussing money. I didn't trust him, though I couldn't admit it then. My father's company, despite its pressures, was built on sweat and honor. I stayed because I wanted to keep my promise to my father, to protect what was mine, rather than become part of Wayne's risky, unfamiliar world. I remember my last day at the office, standing by my desk, looking at the awards on the wall, the photos with my father. I had done everything to preserve the Hastings legacy. I thought retirement would be my reward, a chance to slow down, to grow closer to Wayne and Harry. I planned trips, dreamed of family dinners. I bought a small notebook and filled it with ideas. Fishing trips, dinners at Harry's favorite Italian place, simply watching movies together. I pictured us laughing like a real family. But unexpectedly, the man I had spent more than half my life with wanted to leave without explanation. That evening, Wayne walked into the living room, holding a stack of papers. "We need to talk," he said, his voice ice cold. I looked down and saw the words "divorce petition" in bold print. I sat there, hands trembling, speechless. Wayne said he wanted freedom, that the marriage no longer had meaning. I asked why, but he just turned away, saying, "You'll be fine, Melissa. You've always been strong." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurting, but because I was in shock. I thought of Harry, the boy I raised, and told myself, at least I still had him. I called Harry, but he didn't answer. I texted, emailed, no response. Worry gnawed at me. Had something happened to him? I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, staring at the family photos. One showed the three of us at the park, Harry on Wayne's shoulders, me smiling beside them. I wondered, all those years, was I the only one trying to hold this family together? I didn't know then that the most horrifying truth was waiting for me, ready to tear apart everything I believed. I sat in the living room, the divorce papers still clutched in my hand from the night before. My head throbbed as if the world had just caved in. I was 65, having spent most of my life preserving this family, and now I was just a woman abandoned by her husband, holding a cold piece of paper. My mind was blank. I didn't know what to do next. I called Harry again, leaving a voicemail this time. "Harry, it's Mom. I need to talk to you. Please call me back." I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hand trembled as I put the phone down. I thought about him, about the days I sat in the stands cheering him on during high school football games. He used to run up, hug me, and say, "Mom, I did it." Where was he now? Why wasn't he answering? I opened my email, typed a short message. "Harry, what's wrong? I'm worried." Still no reply. A creeping fear settled in my heart, the feeling that I was losing him, just like I had lost Wayne. I questioned whether I was ever truly part of this family. Or was I just a placeholder? Someone to cook, clean, and care for Harry, so Wayne could live the life he wanted. I shook my head, trying to banish the thought. Harry was my son, blood or not, he was mine. I needed to find him. I decided to drive to Harry's apartment, about 20 minutes away. Pulling on an old sweater, I grabbed my keys and headed out. Charleston was beautiful as ever in the morning. Oak-lined streets and white-painted houses. But I didn't see the beauty today. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a question. Where is Harry? Is he okay? I turned on the radio, but the music only irritated me. I thought about the last time I saw him, a few weeks ago for dinner. He'd laughed and talked about his job at Wayne's company, but I noticed he avoided my eyes. I'd dismissed it as work stress, but now I wondered if I'd missed something. Arriving at his apartment building, I parked, took a deep breath, and walked up the stairs. I knocked, calling out, "Harry, it's Mom, open the door." Silence. I knocked harder, but still nothing. I stood there, feeling like a stranger at my own son's door. I tried calling again, just the empty ringing. Defeated, I sat on the steps, looking out at the parking lot, trying to stay calm. Maybe he's at work, I told myself. Maybe he'll call back. I returned home, my mind still reeling. I considered calling Wayne, asking if he knew anything about Harry, but the thought of hearing his voice repulsed me. I remembered the moment he handed me the divorce papers, the way he looked at me as if I were a discarded object. I decided to call an old friend, Susan, who used to work with me at the family company. Susan was blunt, always spoke her mind. I told her about the divorce, about Harry's silence. Susan paused, then said, "Melissa, you need to talk to Harry, and if Wayne is up to something shady, you need to find out." Susan's words jolted me. I thanked her and hung up. I couldn't just sit here waiting. I needed to act. I opened my laptop, checking Harry's emails again, hoping for a clue. I found an older email from months ago, a photo of him and Wayne at a company event. I zoomed in. Wayne was smiling, but Harry wasn't. He was looking down, lost in thought. Was he hiding something from me? I closed the laptop, stood up, and resolved to go to Wayne's office tomorrow. If Harry wouldn't answer, I would find him. I needed to know what was happening. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I remembered the nights I sat by Harry's bedside when he was small, how he'd hold my hand and call Mommy in his tiny voice. Those memories were once my everything, but now they felt like daggers. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I knew tomorrow would change everything. I just didn't expect the truth I was about to face would be more painful than anything I could have imagined. Did you think what I'd been through was enough to break my heart? No, the truth that followed was the ultimate agony for a mother like me. I woke early the next morning, before sunrise. My head felt heavy, as if I'd battled nightmares all night. I made a cup of black coffee and sat in the kitchen, looking out the window. The oak trees stood sentinel, as they had for 60 years. But today they looked lonely, just like me. I couldn't sit here waiting for Harry to call or Wayne to change his mind. I needed answers. I put on an old coat, grabbed my keys, and drove towards Wayne's office. But what I saw there, and where I went next, changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Driving through familiar Charleston streets felt suffocating today. My thoughts were consumed by Harry, his unanswered calls, the closed door at his apartment. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to stay calm, but my heart pounded like a drum. When I reached Wayne's office building, I parked down the street, hidden but with a clear view of the entrance. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I needed to see Harry, to hear him say he was still my son. I watched people come and go, expensive suits, polished briefcases. Then I saw them, Wayne and Harry, emerging from the main doors. Wayne, in a gray suit, walked briskly. Harry walked beside him, head bowed as if carrying a heavy burden. I started to open my car door to call out, but something stopped me. The way they walked, the way Wayne placed a hand on Harry's shoulder, possessively, guiding him. A chill ran down my spine. I started the car and followed them, keeping a safe distance. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I needed to understand. They drove through downtown, then turned onto a smaller road leading towards the outskirts. My heart beat faster with every mile. Finally, they pulled up to an old cemetery where moss-covered headstones stood silently under the trees. I parked further down, killed the engine, and watched them get out. Wayne led the way. Harry followed, carrying a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. I felt breathless, the air in the car suddenly thin. I slipped out of my car, closing the door quietly. I followed them, keeping my distance, ducking behind trees and gravestones. The cemetery was quiet, only the wind sighing through the branches and my own footsteps on the grass. I saw Wayne and Harry stop before a grave. Harry knelt, placed the flowers on the headstone, and I heard his voice, quiet but clear. "Mom, I've come to visit." I froze, the ground seeming to drop beneath me. Mom? I was his mother. I raised him, held him when he cried, nursed him when he was sick. Who was this mom he spoke of? I crept closer, hiding behind a large oak, near enough to read the inscription. Catherine Grant, 19601995. Beloved mother and wife. Catherine Grant. The name struck me like a physical blow. I knew who she was, Wayne's old girlfriend, from before my parents forced me to meet him. My naive 30-year-old self thought they could remain friends after breaking up. She even attended our wedding. Wayne had assured me it was all in the past. But now, the pieces clicked together. The day Wayne came home brooding, saying he'd attended an old friend's funeral just days before bringing Harry home. I remembered him speaking of her sadly, but I never pressed, not wanting to upset him. Could that friend have been Catherine? Was Harry their secret child? Had I been a fool, a puppet, all these years? Now I understood. The image before me tore my heart to shreds. I clung to the tree trunk, trying not to collapse. Everything rushed back. Wayne bringing Harry home, claiming he was abandoned. The strange way he sometimes looked at Harry, not like an adoptive father. Harry growing up, with those blue eyes exactly like Wayne's. I had been blind, letting my love for Harry obscure everything. I had raised another woman's son, thinking he was mine, while Wayne and Catherine, even in death, were his real family. I felt betrayed, not just by Wayne but by my entire life. Harry stood up, wiped his eyes, and said something to Wayne. I couldn't hear, but I saw Wayne nod, placing a hand on his shoulder. They walked back to their car and I remained frozen until the engine noise faded. I walked to the grave, staring at the headstone. Catherine Grant. I wondered what she was like. Did she know about me? Did she know I was raising her son, loving him as my own flesh and blood? A flicker of sympathy touched me, but the pain inside was overwhelming. I didn't cry, but my heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. I returned to my car, sitting in silence, hands gripping the wheel. Those cherished memories were now tainted, revealed as lies. I thought of Wayne, how he'd brought Harry into my life like an act of charity, all while knowing the truth. Did he ever feel guilt? Or was I just a convenient placeholder, a caretaker for his son while he lived his life? I went back to the familiar living room where the family photo still hung, now a bitter mockery. I wanted to rip it down, but I couldn't. I just sat there, feeling like an intruder in my own home. I knew I had to confront them, demand the truth, no matter how painful. But I was afraid. Afraid that what I heard would destroy the last shred of hope within me. Yet, I also knew I couldn't live with this lie any longer. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and told myself, Melissa, you have to do this. Not for them, but for yourself. I sat in the living room all night, staring at the family photo until dawn. My head ached, the image of Catherine Grant's headstone replaying alongside Harry's voice calling her mom. 30 years I'd loved him, believing he was my son, only to find I was an outsider in my own story. I had no plan, just simmering anger and pain. I drove back to the office building, parking right out front this time, not caring who saw me. I strode into the lobby, my heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The young receptionist, her smile practiced, asked if I had an appointment. My voice was hard. I am Melissa Hastings. I need to see Wayne Prescott, now. She hesitated, but perhaps seeing the look in my eyes, she made a quick call and directed me to the 5th floor. The elevator doors opened, and Wayne was standing there, gray suit, talking to another man. He turned, saw me, and a flicker of surprise crossed his face before his usual composure returned. Melissa, what are you doing here? He asked, his tone soft but cold as ice. I didn't answer, just said, I need to talk to you and Harry. Wayne frowned but nodded, leading me into his office. I glanced around, Large wooden desk, leather chairs, photos of Wayne with other businessmen. No pictures of me or Harry. I felt like an alien. Harry entered a few minutes later. Blue shirt, hair messy like he'd just woken up. He looked at me and I waited for a smile, a hug, any sign that I was still his mother. But he just nodded slightly. Miss Melissa, what are you doing here? The words Miss Melissa hit me like a physical blow. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. I was at the cemetery yesterday, I said, looking straight at Harry, then turning to Wayne. I know about Catherine Grant. I know Harry is her son. And yours, Wayne. The silence in the room was suffocating. Wayne stood there, arms crossed, his sharp eyes looking right through me as if I were worthless. Then he laughed, a scornful, cruel sound that made me want to shrink away. You certainly know how to dig, Melissa, he sneered. But what do you think this cheap trick changes? What are you anyway? A useless woman, couldn't even bear a child? I gave you this house, nice clothes, good food, and the honor of being Harry's mother. You should be on your knees thanking me for not kicking you out years ago. His words were razor blades, slicing my heart piece by piece. I wanted to scream, to smash things, to wipe that smug look off his face, but I stood frozen, hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. Refusing to let him see me tremble, I turned to Harry, my heart constricting, hoping he'd say something, anything, to defend me, to show that my 30 years of love meant something. But he lifted his chin, his eyes cold, devoid of the warmth of the boy who once called me Mom. Aunt Melissa? He practically spat the words. Stop dreaming. You are not my real mother and you never will be. No matter what you do, I choose my father. He's my blood, the man who loved my real mother, unlike you, just an outsider who walked into my life. His words were a direct punch to my chest, stealing my breath. Harry, the boy I'd stayed up with when he was sick, the boy I'd cheered for in the rain at every game, now stood before me, looking at me like an enemy, calling me aunt with contempt. Were all those years, the hugs, the smiles, the times he called me Mom, were they all fake? My head spun. Had he ever truly seen me as his mother, or was I just a temporary substitute? I didn't cry in front of them. I stood tall, looked from Wayne to Harry, and said, I agree to the divorce, Wayne, but both of you, prepare yourselves. I am not someone you can just push down. My voice was calm, but inside I felt like I was burning. I turned my back and walked out of the office without a backward glance. The receptionist called after me, but I didn't hear her. I went straight to my car, sat behind the wheel, and gripped it tightly. I didn't know where I found the strength for those words, but I knew I couldn't let them see me weak. Back home, I sat in the living room, looking at the family photo. I no longer wanted to tear it down. I wanted to keep it, a reminder that I had loved with all my heart, even if it wasn't returned. I knew I couldn't go on like this, couldn't let Wayne and Harry think they could trample me without consequence. I picked up the phone and called Heather Collins, my best friend and a brilliant lawyer. When Heather answered, I said, my voice firm, Heather, I need your help. I'm getting a divorce, and I'm going to make Wayne pay for what he's done. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let them destroy me. Never. The next morning, I drove to Heather's office in downtown Charleston. I wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, wanting to shed the persona of Mrs. Melissa Hastings of the high society parties. I just wanted to be myself, a 65-year-old woman trying to reclaim her life. Heather's office was on the third floor of an old building, large windows overlooking an oak-lined street. As I walked in, Heather stood up and hugged me tightly, as if sensing I was on the edge. Melissa, are you okay? She asked, her eyes full of concern. I sank into a chair, managing a weak smile. Not really, but I'm not giving up. Heather had been my friend since college, the only one who never turned away, whether it was society whispers behind my back or Wayne's growing coldness. She made me a cup of mint tea, set it before me, then sat down with her notepad. I told her everything, from beginning to end, the divorce papers, the cemetery, Catherine Grant, the confrontation in Wayne's office. The words poured out, as if stopping would make me crumble. I recounted Wayne's insults, calling me useless, and how Harry stood there choosing his father over me. My voice trembled when I mentioned Harry calling me Miss Melissa, and Heather squeezed my hand. "He's a bastard, Melissa," she said, anger flashing in her eyes. "And Harry? I can't believe he'd do that. But we'll make them pay, I promise." Her words were a small flame warming me. For the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. Heather began reviewing the documents related to my assets. My father had left me substantial shares in the family company, the mansion, and a multi-million-dollar investment fund. Heather explained that South Carolina divorce law could mean losing part of my assets if Wayne proved fault on my part. But then, she found something that stunned us both. In the company email account I still had access to, there was an email from a lawyer Wayne had hired, mistakenly sent to my old address. It detailed a plan to frame me, accusing me of marital misconduct, like adultery or neglect, so Wayne could seize my entire inheritance. I read it, feeling the blood rush to my head. "He didn't just want to leave me," I choked out. "I wanted to steal everything my father left me." Heather slammed her hand on the desk. "He won't win. We'll crush him." Heather suggested I return to the mansion and search for any documents proving Wayne's wrongdoing, company ledgers, personal emails. I nodded, though fear prickled inside me. I'd never snooped through Wayne's things, always respecting his privacy, but now I had no choice. Back home, I stood before the mansion, taking a deep breath. The house was silent, save for the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. I went straight to Wayne's study, my heart pounding like a thief's. The room was tidy. Large desk, computer, and a locked filing cabinet. I searched the drawers for the key and luckily found it, as if Wayne was too arrogant to think I'd dare look. I opened the cabinet, flipping through files, company contracts, bills, and then, in a small, unlabeled folder, my heart stopped. It was proof of Wayne's illegal dealings. Bribes to local officials, money transfers to secret Cayman accounts. I photographed every page with my phone. Just then I heard a car pull up outside. Startled, I quickly turned off the light and hid behind the desk. Footsteps echoed in the hall, then Wayne's voice on the phone. "Yes, I'll handle it," he said coldly. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't enter. Thankfully, the footsteps receded, and the front door closed. I continued searching and found an old envelope in another drawer. Inside were photos of Wayne with young women, at restaurants, hotels, even in a car. I recognized one girl, his former secretary from years ago, who always smiled sweetly at me. I sank to the floor, staring at the photos, feeling betrayed yet again. I remembered all the nights Wayne claimed he was working late, the business trips he never elaborated on. All lies. I put the photos in my bag, determined to use them to protect myself, and perhaps to show Harry who his father truly was. Leaving the study, I felt both empowered and exhausted. I called Heather. "I have proof. Bribery, affairs, everything." Heather told me to bring it immediately. I drove to her office, handing over the documents and photos. Heather examined them, her eyes gleaming. "Melissa, with this, we don't just win the divorce. We could put Wayne in prison." I nodded, feeling no satisfaction, only the resolve of a woman who had been broken, but was now standing up. I thought of my parents, their legacy, and vowed Wayne wouldn't steal it. Back home, I sat in the living room looking at the family photo. This time, I felt no pain. I felt resilient, ready to fight, not out of anger, but because I deserved to live. I didn't want Harry living under the illusion that Wayne was worth sacrificing his relationship with me for. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and acted. I uploaded the photos of Wayne's affairs into an email. I chose the clearest one, Wayne embracing a young woman in a fancy restaurant, both laughing as if I didn't exist. Looking at it felt like another stab wound. But I didn't stop. I wrote a short line to Harry. "Your mother was just another mistress. To your father, any woman can be loved." My finger hovered over the send button. I knew it would hurt him deeply, but I had to do it. I clicked send. I didn't know what Harry would do with it, but I needed him to face the truth, even if it broke him. The next day I called Tom, an old friend who was a retired police officer. He still had connections within the Charleston PD. I briefly explained what I'd found, the bribery, the offshore accounts. Tom was silent for a moment, then said, "Melissa, send it all to me. I'll get it to the right people." I thanked him and forwarded copies of the documents via a secure email address he provided. Hitting send felt like dropping a heavy stone from my shoulders. I knew this was the beginning of Wayne's downfall, and for the first time, I felt in control. A few days later, Heather called. She had filed the divorce papers, and with the evidence I provided, Wayne had virtually no chance of contesting my assets. "He won't get a cent of your father's legacy," Heather said confidently. I nodded, feeling relieved but drained. The divorce was the first step, but I needed to ensure Wayne couldn't harm me further. I arranged to meet Tom at a small cafe on the outskirts of town to hand over the physical documents. When I arrived, Tom was already there wearing a plaid shirt and baseball cap. He looked at me seriously. "Melissa, are you sure? Once this goes to the police, there's no turning back." I nodded, sliding the folder across the table. "I'm sure," I said. Tom nodded, put the folder in his briefcase, and promised to deliver it to the investigative unit that day. On the day of the divorce hearing, I stood before the mirror in a simple blue dress. Heather accompanied me into the courtroom. Wayne was already there, dressed in a black suit, but his usual smirk was gone. He glared at me, full of anger, but I met his gaze steadily. The judge, an older man with a deep voice, reviewed the papers. Wayne tried to argue, claiming he deserved a share of the assets for taking care of me for 30 years. I almost laughed but remained silent. Heather presented the evidence: bribery, secret accounts, the photos of his affairs. The judge's expression as he looked at Wayne said it all. He banged his gavel, approved the divorce, and ruled that I retained my entire inheritance. Leaving the courthouse felt like shedding an enormous weight. Heather hugged me in the hallway. "You did it, Melissa." I smiled, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. I decided to leave Charleston. The city was once home, but now it held too many memories I didn't want to keep. I browsed real estate listings, searching for a quiet place to start over. I chose a small house in a coastal town a few hours' drive away. It had a wooden porch overlooking the ocean and large windows that let the light flood in. I called the agent and put down a deposit immediately. I didn't take much. Simple clothes, a few books, and a small box containing Harry's mementos, the drawing he made, his football medal, a letter he wrote as a child. I didn't know why I kept them, but I couldn't throw them away. They were proof that I had loved him, even if he didn't choose me. On moving day, I stood before the mansion one last time. The oak trees stood guard over my past. I got in the car and didn't look back. Arriving in the new town, I felt a sense of peace. The small house smelled of old wood and sea salt. I opened the windows, listened to the waves, and began unpacking. I hung a seascape painting, placed a potted flower on the kitchen counter, and bought an old armchair for reading. Each small act, cleaning a window, making tea, felt like building a new life, free from the shadows of Wayne and Harry. I signed up to volunteer at the local community center, helping underprivileged children learn to read and write. The first day, seeing the kids run and laugh, I remembered Harry when he was little. But I didn't feel sad. I sat down to read with a little girl named Lily, and when she smiled, my heart felt lighter. I started spending several days a week at the center, teaching art, telling stories, sometimes just listening to their dreams. Each smile was a step in my healing. One evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the ocean orange and pink. Sipping my tea, I felt serene. I thought about Wayne, about the investigation he now faced. I thought about Harry, the email I sent. I didn't know if he'd read it, if he felt pain, but I wasn't angry anymore. I just pitied him for choosing someone unworthy. I knew the battle with Wayne wasn't over, but I had won a major victory. I had found myself again. I stood up, went inside, and for the first time in months, I slept soundly, dreamlessly, as if the ocean outside had sung me a lullaby. I sat on my porch, having found a place to rebuild after the wreckage caused by Wayne and Harry. This small town, with its cobblestone streets and whitewashed houses, had become my home. I was no longer Melissa Hastings of Charleston, bound by high society expectations. I was just Melissa, 65, learning to love herself. But even as peace settled in, old wounds still throbbed, and I knew my healing journey was only beginning. In those first weeks, I walked everywhere, absorbing the slow rhythm of the town. It was small, a bakery, a grocery store, and a little cafe called Blue Tide. I remember my first visit, the smell of fresh cookies making me smile. The owner, Ellen, a woman in her 70s with neatly tied silver hair, greeted me like an old friend. "New in town? Sit down, I'll get you some coffee," she said warmly. I sat, holding the hot mug, and for the first time in months, felt like I belonged somewhere. Ellen told me about the town, the friendly neighbors, the annual seafood festival. I listened, nodded, and felt my burdens lighten, soothed by her simple stories. Every morning I woke early, made coffee, and sat on my porch. I loved watching the sunrise paint the sky over the pine trees. I bought an old wooden chair at a flea market, placed it by the window, and it became my favorite spot. I'd sit there sipping coffee, listening to birdsong, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. I remembered Charleston mornings, waking in the vast mansion, anxious about work or society gossip. Here, nobody cared who I used to be. They just saw Melissa, the new woman in town, always with a book and a quiet smile. I started volunteering, helping children with reading and writing. The first day, I hesitated, unsure what I could offer. But entering the colorful room, children's drawings taped to the walls, I saw Lily, about 8, sitting alone with a book. She looked up, her big eyes reminding me so much of Harry, the young Harry who held my hand and called me Mom. I sat beside her. "Would you like me to read with you?" She nodded, and we began a story about a lost whale. When Lily laughed, my heart warmed, though a small part still ached for Harry. I spent 4 days a week at the center. There was Sam, mischievous but loving stories, Emma, shy but drawing beautifully. I taught them art, told tales, and listened to their dreams, astronauts, doctors, or simply owning a dog. Each smile healed me. But sometimes, when a child called me Miss Melissa, I remembered Harry's cold voice, and I'd have to turn away, pretending to wipe dust from my eye. I wasn't angry anymore, but I couldn't forget he chose Wayne, called me Miss after 30 years as his mother. I began rediscovering myself, doing things I'd never allowed myself in Charleston. I joined a dance class at the community center, initially thinking I was too old. The instructor, Carla, laughed. "Melissa, age is just a number. Just dance," she urged. Standing in the studio in leggings and a t-shirt, I felt clumsy at first, but as the music played, my body felt lighter, shedding years of heaviness. I remember catching my reflection after class, sweaty but smiling. For the first time, I felt beautiful. Not because of clothes or jewels, but because I was alive. I joined an outdoor fitness group, jogging and doing yoga on the beach. Each morning, standing on the sand, breathing the salt air, feeling the waves lap my feet, was invigorating. I started learning piano, a childhood dream dismissed by my mother. Pianos don't build reputations. I bought an old upright from a neighbor and placed it in my small living room. My first attempts were clumsy, but every time I sat down, picking out a simple tune, it felt like conversing with my soul. I remember playing an old Billy Joel song one evening, laughing when I hit a wrong note. But I kept playing, knowing no one here judged me. I started journaling, pouring out my thoughts. I wrote about Wayne's decades of deceit. I wrote about Harry, the pain of his betrayal, but also the love I once felt. I wrote about my parents, the pressure they imposed, and how I was slowly forgiving them, knowing they only wanted my safety in the way they understood. Most importantly, I wrote about myself, the woman who once felt worthless for being infertile, who measured her value by others' eyes. I wrote, "Melissa, you did it. You stood up, even when the world wanted you to fall." Each page was a step towards self-forgiveness, though I knew I'd never forget the pain Wayne and Harry caused. One afternoon, a text came from Heather. The police had officially started investigating Wayne based on my evidence. "He's panicking," Heather wrote. I read it without triumph, only relief, like closing a chapter. I went out to the porch, looked at the ocean. The steady rhythm of the waves seemed to promise everything would be okay. The past would always be part of me, but here, in this small town, I was building a future, not for anyone else, but for myself. The volunteer work, the morning coffees by the sea, the clumsy piano notes each evening, they were healing me, piece by piece. But the past, however much I tried to leave it behind, still found ways to intrude. One evening, flicking on the TV and seeing Wayne's face on the news, I knew that chapter wasn't truly closed. And then, a call from Ben Whitaker, my former butler, brought clarity but also a heavy weight to my heart. I rarely watched much TV, but that evening, seeking background noise, I flipped through channels and stopped at a local Charleston news report. Wayne's face filled the screen. I jolted, nearly spilling my tea. Businessman Wayne Prescott arrested by police for investigation into allegations of bribery and financial fraud, the anchor announced, crisp and cold. Images of Wayne, white shirt, handcuffed, being led from his office, flashed repeatedly. I sat frozen, staring, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. The man who was my husband who slept beside me was now a criminal on the news. A sliver of satisfaction surfaced. He deserved it after everything. But simultaneously, a hollowness spread within me. A mourning for the years wasted loving someone unreal. I turned off the TV, wanting no more. I went to the porch, breathing the sea air to dispel the heaviness. I knew I'd played a part in his downfall. Yet, I felt only weariness, as if the fight had cost too much. Sitting on the wooden chair, looking at the ocean, I wondered if Harry had seen the news. Did he think of me? Of the email I sent? The line, "Your mother was just another mistress"? A few days later, my phone rang while I was dusting. The caller ID showed Ben Whitaker, our former butler in Charleston. Ben had worked for us for over 20 years, witnessing everything, the lavish parties, my solitary tears in the kitchen. I answered hesitantly, "Ben, is that you?" His voice was low and tired. "Melissa, I need to talk to you. About Wayne and Harry." I sank onto the sofa, my heart racing, bracing myself. Ben described the chaos at the mansion. After Wayne's arrest, staff quit. Phones rang incessantly with calls from press and lawyers. But what stunned me was his account of Harry. Ben said Harry and Wayne had a massive argument days before. "He screamed at Wayne," Ben recounted, his voice thick with emotion. "Harry said he felt deceived, that Wayne only used him as a pawn to keep your family's money." I listened silently, nodding, though Ben couldn't see. I pictured Harry in the living room, confronting Wayne, eyes blazing with anger and disillusionment. Ben added, "He mentioned you, Melissa. He said he regretted what he said to you." I gripped the phone tighter, my chest constricting. Harry regretted it? After everything, had he thought of me? "Did he say anything else?" I asked. Ben sighed. "He just said he wanted to make things right but didn't know how. Then he left the house. No one knows where he went." I hung up, sitting there, staring out the window. I remembered Ben's quiet kindnesses. Once, crying in the kitchen after a fight with Wayne, Ben had silently placed a hot cup of tea before me, murmuring, "You'll be all right, Mrs. Melissa. You're stronger than you think." Ben never judged, never sided with Wayne despite him being the boss. He was the only one in that house who truly saw my pain, and now he was my last link to that past. I went back to the porch, trying to sort through the turmoil of emotions. Part of me was satisfied Wayne was paying the price. He'd lied, humiliated me, and now he was losing everything. But another part felt sorrow, not for Wayne, but for Harry. Did he truly regret his actions, or was he just angry at being betrayed by Wayne? I thought of the years I raised him, the bedside vigils, the cheering at games. I loved him like my own son. But he chose Wayne, called me Miss Melissa. Could the regret Ben spoke of erase that wound? I wasn't sure. I took out my journal, writing about Ben's call. Wayne is paying the price, but Harry... I don't know what to think. I've forgiven myself, but I haven't forgiven him yet. I wrote about Ben's kindness, how he reminded me of my strength. Writing helped organize the conflicting feelings, satisfaction for justice served, emptiness thinking of Harry. I closed the journal, stood up, and decided to walk on the beach. The rhythm of the waves calmed me, reminding me how far I'd come. The past would never disappear, but I was living for the present. And that mattered most. The next day, I returned to the community center. Lily ran up, hugged me, and handed me a drawing. A house by the sea, a woman on the porch. "That's Miss Melissa," she beamed. I hugged her back, my eyes stinging. I thought of Harry's drawing and realized that whether he regretted his actions or not, I could still love, still give. I hung Lily's picture in my living room near the piano, a reminder that I was building a new family. Not of blood but of heart. The road ahead was still long, but I was ready, with everything I had. This town had given me a new life, peace found in morning coffees, volunteer hours, and clumsy piano notes. News of Wayne's arrest and Ben's call made me realize the past, though painful, no longer controlled me. I had forgiven myself, learned to love without needing reciprocation. But then, one quiet afternoon, a knock echoed through the house. I knew the past wasn't done with me yet. Harry stood on my porch, and this time, I had to make the final choice. I was wiping the kitchen counter when the knock came. I assumed it was Ellen from Blue Tide, often bringing cookies. Wiping my hands on my apron, I went to the door. Peeking through the small glass pane, my heart stopped. Harry stood there. Old coat, messy hair, tired eyes fixed on the ground. I froze, hand gripping the doorframe, unsure what to do. Harry, the boy I'd held when he cried, the boy I'd raised for 30 years, stood on my doorstep after everything he'd said. I remembered his cold voice in Wayne's office calling me Miss Melissa. Remembered him choosing Wayne. I wanted to fling the door open, scream why, but something held me back. He knocked again, harder this time. "Mom, Melissa, it's me," he said, his voice hoarse as if from crying. I stood behind the closed door, hand tight on the lock, but didn't turn it. Through the peephole, I saw him lower his head, shoulders trembling slightly. His eyes looked full of remorse, but I felt no pity. I remembered the email I sent, the words, "Your mother was just another mistress." Maybe he'd read it, maybe he knew the truth about Wayne, but it didn't change what he'd said. Didn't erase the pain he'd inflicted. I stood there, heart pounding, telling myself, he doesn't deserve forgiveness. Not now. I turned my back, walked into the living room, trying to ignore the third knock. I had loved him as my own son, but he had chosen betrayal, and I couldn't let myself be weak again. The knocking stopped. I heard footsteps retreat, then a car engine start. I stood up, looked through the window, and watched Harry's car disappear down the road. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt strong, as if I had just closed a door that should have been shut long ago. I chose silence, not out of anger, but because it felt like the most fitting consequence for an ungrateful child. Harry had his chance. He made his choice, and I couldn't let him walk back into my new life simply because he felt regret. I returned to my life as if Harry had never appeared. When the person who broke your heart returns, do you open the door, or do you do as I did? One morning, I stood on the beach, bare feet sinking into the cool sand, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves. Sunlight sparkled on the water, and I smiled, embracing the peace I'd found in this small town. The day Harry stood on my porch, I chose silence, not from anger, but because I knew I deserved happiness, free from the pull of the past. Now, at 65, I had built a new life filled with morning yoga, rewarding volunteer work, and friends who felt like family. I was no longer Melissa Hastings of Charleston, trapped by reputation and pain. I was Melissa, living fully and proud of it. A typical day started early with the sunrise. I'd make coffee and step onto my porch, my old wooden chair a faithful companion. Sipping coffee, listening to birds and waves, each day felt like a gift. Then, dressed in leggings and a t-shirt, I'd join the women's yoga group on the beach. Sarah, my friend from the book club, always teased, "Melissa, you're the only one who can do bridge pose without groaning." I'd laugh, replying, "Sarah, I'm 65. If I can't manage it, I might as well surrender to the sand." Yoga made my body feel strong, reclaiming years stolen by my Charleston life. Afternoons were for the community center. I'd become a fixture there, teaching art, reading stories, listening to innocent dreams. One day, reading to a group, a boy named Ethan sat beside me, his eyes bright. With his blonde hair and shy smile, he reminded me uncannily of young Harry. My heart clenched for a moment, but then Ethan took my hand. "Miss Melissa, Keep reading, please. I love your stories. I smiled and continued, realizing Ethan wasn't Harry. He was himself, and I could love him without comparison. Later, I decided to sponsor Ethan, helping with school fees and books. It felt like closing a door on the past, not by forgetting Harry, but by opening my heart to a new future. Evenings were often spent in the living room, playing the piano or journaling. My old piano was now accustomed to my clumsy fingers, and I loved playing Billy Joel, especially Piano Man. Sometimes I'd hit a wrong note and laugh so loudly I'd startle the neighbor's cat. Journaling was my conversation with myself. I recorded town life, moments with Ethan, Lily, Ellen, and Sarah. I wrote about the freedom of the beach, the joy of Carla's dance class, the realization that I no longer needed anyone's approval to feel whole. One line made me pause and smile. I won, not because they lost, but because I found myself. One day, while watering porch flowers, the mail carrier brought a letter from Heather. Inside, her familiar script informed me Wayne had been officially sentenced. 7 years for bribery and financial fraud. His company was bankrupt, the Charleston mansion seized to pay debts. Heather mentioned Harry, too. He'd left Charleston right after the fight with Wayne, destination unknown. Ben said he looked like a lost soul, Heather wrote. I read the letter, set it down, and looked out at the sea. I waited for a pang of pain, of regret, but felt nothing. They were part of my story, but not its ending. I have no regrets about not opening the door. I gave Harry all my love, but he chose Wayne, and now he had to live with that choice. I wasn't angry or blaming, just a little sad for him, because he lost not only me, but himself in Wayne's web of lies. But I couldn't save him. He was old enough to be responsible for himself. I continued my life, filled with simple joys unknown in Charleston. I began investing part of my inheritance into the community center, buying books, art supplies, even a new piano for the children. I wanted them to have the chances I missed, to dream, create, be themselves. Ethan often visited on weekends, bringing drawings. Once he drew me on the beach flying a kite. Miss Melissa, I want to fly a kite with you, he declared. I hugged him, promised we would, knowing the love I gave Ethan, Lily, and the other children was healing the wounds Harry left behind. One evening, watching the sunset from my porch, I opened my journal. I wrote about my journey. The days I thought I wouldn't survive Wayne's cruelty and Harry's betrayal. I wrote about rising again, finding myself in this small town, surrounded by friends, children, and rediscovered dreams. I wrote, I won, not because I defeated Wayne or Harry, but because I found Melissa, strong, loving, and happy. I closed the journal, smiled, and went inside. The waves outside continued their song of hope, and I knew, whatever the future held, I was ready, with an open heart and a life truly my own. Have you ever loved someone so much you forgot yourself, only to realize one day you were the one forgotten? Melissa's story isn't just about painful betrayal. It's a journey of rebirth. A reminder that no matter your age, you deserve a life of kindness and genuine love. No matter how broken the past, you always have the right to start again, not for anyone else, but for yourself. If you've experienced similar hurts or felt overlooked in your own family, feel free to share your story. We listen, not to judge, but to understand. And if this story touched you, please consider liking it. Leave a comment like, I have been there, if you too have sacrificed in silence. Follow for more stories of healing and strength for the soul.